Hey, good morning. How's everybody doing? Good. So I'm not Marty. Just get that out of the way. I'm Ted. I'm the marriage pastor here. It's a pleasure being with you this morning. I wasn't anxious about today until I got the text from Northstar.Church, which says we're going to find out how to move forward even when circumstances are difficult. And I was like, oh man, I may have overpromised a little on my sermon description, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't worry. So what I wanted to talk about today, especially as it relates to this series that Marty's been in on family, is how kind of circumstances lately, at least for me, have been a bit chaotic in how that informs my marriage, how that informs my parenting. And so my kids get to choose a lot of things. They can choose to like Chick-fil-A, or they can choose not to, but they don't get to choose really who they live with. They're kind of stuck with me, you know. And I think about that, and I think about some of the things that we've been facing, you know, over the last little bit. And this is not a political statement. You can go back to 2018. When we drive through our community, we still see a few blue tarps, you know. So we've been going through a lot. And so how does that translate into my home? How do I do with that? And so Marty asked me a few weeks back, he's like, hey, would you like to communicate? I was like, absolutely, I would love to. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get to what I would like to say, but I know what I would like to say. And so this morning's message is more of a, I wish we could be doing this over coffee, if that makes sense, that we could kind of have a dialogue back and forth, because I think you could probably say some things to me, and I could probably say some things to you. So if you could just think of this more as like the two of us trying to communicate, you know, about where we are and what we're going through. Because this really is kind of a journey for me that I'm on. It's not something that I've mastered, you know. It's not something that I've kind of come to a pinnacle with, and I'm like, hey, I've got it all figured out. So if you want to know anything about anxiety, come and ask me. It's not that. It's a little bit more of a conversation. But I knew, as it affects especially the little people in my home, my little person's 17 now, so that's kind of odd. But as it affects them, what I carry, my anxiety and my concerns directly relate to them, and I think, like, what kind of home am I creating? You know, what kind of environment am I creating? And I'll be honest, another kind of emotion that I've been struggling with a little bit lately is kind of bitterness. So my oldest son is 17. He'll be 18 this year. He will be an adult this year. And I've wanted it to be like the most joyous time ever, you know, like that. And then I got the insurance bill. I don't want to scare anybody, all right? If you have small kids, save for their car. Sure, do that. Also, you're going to be making a monthly payment to the insurance person that you are not ready for. And it's things like this, and it kind of colors where we are. And I get frustrated. I get a little bitter. And I try to figure out, like, how do I move forward? And that makes itself manifest again in my home. And there's two things about me that I know. One is I have a high relational need for comfort. And so when I get stressed out, when I get anxious, I want to be comforted. So that looks like food to me. I don't know if anybody can identify with that. That's how we did things in my home. You know, that's how we celebrated things. I wish we would have been that family that did a 5K for all birthdays, but that's not what we did. You know, we had fried chicken for birthdays, and I still do, you know. So I tend to run towards that, and I tend to run towards numbing my pain. So this is weird. This is like a weird phenomenon. And you may relate to this, you may not. But there's something about watching YouTube. You see people fail or flourish, you know, and that's kind of the spectrum that I go to. You can sort of numb your pain by watching people on a boat ramp fail. And if you've never done that, I'm just saying it. Or you watch people journey across the United States, and it's this epic challenge, and it's like weird because I'm sitting there watching people live their lives, and my kids are watching me see people live their life, and I think, how does this work out? And so this morning, this is sort of the question, or this is what we're working on: what to do when you are overwhelmed. So what do I do when I'm overwhelmed? Especially with someone like myself, I seek comfort. And what do I do when I'm overwhelmed? And so we like to think about all the positive things that Jesus said. I like to think about those positive things, that he's going to be with me, and I like that. There's one thing that Jesus said that I think we like to overlook. He says this in John 16:33. It says, in this world you will have trouble. Okay? So in this world, there's a guarantee of trouble. Now, I like the next part, right? This is the part we go to. But be encouraged. My kids learn, take heart. I've overcome the world. I've won the battle over the world. So we can take heart in that. But this is a part also. There's going to be some level of trouble. I like to think that in this world, other people will have trouble. But because you put your faith in Jesus, there will be no trouble. And when I was a kid, I had this kind of childlike faith that all the Bible stories, ended well. And I never really thought about Noah on the ark. 40 days, you got all those pairs of animals and your entire family. There's some trouble on that boat. You know what I'm saying? We just think about the outcome, but there's some trouble. There's some trouble on that ark. And so I struggle with this tension. I don't know what to do with this sometimes. I'll just be honest. I don't know what to do with the trouble. And so we come to our first promise. And I'll be honest, this promise helps me some, but I need a little bit more, okay? I need a little bit more. So the promise is this: don't be anxious about tomorrow, okay? Don't be anxious about tomorrow. This seems, if we're not careful, almost like an invalidation. You could read it this way. Like if I had a married couple come in and the wife says to the husband, hey, we don't have enough money for groceries. And he said, don't worry. I'd be like, ooh, you're invalidating her. Like, she's not hearing that. You've spent all your money on video games or something. She's concerned. But this is Jesus speaking, so that obviously changes the dynamic. He says, don't be anxious about tomorrow. And I want to read the passage of Scripture that this comes from. Set it up a little bit. This comes right on the heels of Jesus being tempted for a long time. So this is not right on the heels of this tremendous victory that he has. This is right on the heels of him being tempted, and he has something to say. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. This comes in Matthew chapter 6. We'll start in verse 25, and we'll just kind of work our way through this. It says, I tell you, do not worry. Don't worry about your life and what you will eat and what you will drink. And don't worry about your body and what you will wear. Isn't there more to life than eating? And so I kind of paused there and I had to ponder. I'm like, I don't know. I really enjoy eating, okay? I get that. Aren't there more important things to the body than clothes? And I can get on board with that. I don't care so much about clothes. And some of you are like, yeah, it is very obvious. That is not your strong suit. But I don't get caught with that one. But he's making a point. And we go on. And so I love this. If you pay attention, he goes high, and then he's going to come low. He says, look at the birds of the air. They don't plant or gather crops. They don't put away crops in storerooms. But your Father who is in heaven feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than they are? Can you add even an hour of your life by worrying? And so he starts high, starts in the sky with the birds. And he asks an important question: aren't you worth more than the birds? I like to think, yeah, I'm more valuable than this. And then you come down to this question, and he's building up to something, and I love this. Can you add even in 1 hour to your life by worrying? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I could have lied in bed and worried about this message even more, and it wouldn't have added an hour to my life. And he's building, he's making a point. And why do you worry about your clothes? See how the wildflowers grow? So now he's low. They don't work or make clothing. But here's what I tell you. Not even Solomon in all of his royal robes was dressed like one of these flowers. And so if you pause there and you think about that, think about flowers. I know not all of you are interested in flowers. I get it. But they are magnificent. Mary and I were driving through an alley yesterday. We live close to there. We weren't just like meandering through people's alleys. And we saw these flowers growing on a fence, and they were these purple flowers, and they had this, I'm not going to make an educated response out of this, but they had stuff coming out, and it was just beautiful. And as I was thinking about the message, I was like, yeah, that's cool. God does that. I don't know I don't know why like part of his agenda was to beautify the earth, that my eyes could respond to that, but he absolutely did. And so I have to think, if he's concerned about those things, how much more is he concerned about me? And then, if this is how God dresses the wild grass, won't he dress you even better? And this is an important word. This comes up quite a bit. Your faith is so small. After all, the grass is here only today, and tomorrow it's thrown into a fire. He's talking about the temporal nature of grass. So don't worry. Don't say, important, don't worry. Don't say, what will you eat, or what will you drink, or what will you wear? People who are ungodly run after all those things. Your Father who is in heaven knows that you need them. So this is a really, really, really important part. Verse 32, people who are ungodly run after all those things. And so he's making a plea with us here, and he's going to make a distinction. But put God's kingdom first. Do what he wants you to do. Then all of those things will be given to you. So don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And so, as I read this, it doesn't really resolve the tension to a certain extent with the trouble, but I get to this question. What am I focused on? And this helps me. What am I focused on? Am I focused on God's kingdom, or am I focused on my kingdom? And the things that are listed inside of his don't worries are all things that kind of bind us up: food, clothing. There's an interesting phenomenon. I'm not really good at this, but I'll share. My brother-in-law has a boat that you can surf behind. And one of the mistakes people make is when they get on the surfboard, they start looking at their feet. That is an instant way to fall, okay? If you look at your feet, you will fall. What you have to do is you have to fix your eyes on the horizon or think about where you want to go. And I think that there's a lot of truth kind of bound up in this verse. I think when I become so anxious, a part of it is I've got my eyes focused on my feet or my clothes or my house or whatever I got going on, and I'm forgetting that there's a kingdom of God that's going on that he wants me to be tuned in with, that he wants me to be looking at. And that helps me. It doesn't wipe away my trouble. It doesn't wash away my trouble, but it helps me. I think one of the points here is, what are you focused on? Where are you looking? And then the second point is this: God's mercies are new every morning. Okay? God's mercies are new every morning. We find this in Lamentations 3:22-23. I've always wondered, it's like, who was Lamentation? So the first part of that word there is lament. So these are a lamenting. And these are specifically written by a guy that was lamenting a kingdom that used to be. Okay? So he saw a kingdom that was sort of a preferred future, and now it's gone, and they're in a bit of a transition. And he's asking these questions. And he comes to this point right here in verse 22 and 23. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So I'm getting a little more traction with my worries that God has mercies for me every morning. Okay? But I'll tell you, a major problem is we want yesterday's mercies or a guarantee of specific future mercies. And I'll explain what I mean. When my kids were small, they were not as expensive, okay? And that's not rocket surgery. I get that, right? But on Saturdays, I could take them to Home Depot. Sometimes they would have a little project that we could put together. That was free. I could put them on a lawnmower, take their picture. They loved that, right? Sometimes there was a hot dog vendor on the way out, but this was the pinnacle, okay? This is where, and I'm so sorry to this generation, you guys don't experience this. There was a thing called a red box. And for $1, you could rent a movie, okay? And for $5, you could get one Little Caesars pizza. And there was only 4 of us at this time, and we could eat one Little Caesars pizza. Now with inflation, it's gone to $5.55. I guess, whatever. And then they have the extra asbestos. They didn't have that back in the day. This is pre that, okay? But my point is, it was so much, it was more simple. In some ways, it was just more simple. I could entertain them so much more simply. And when I came home, they just wanted to hang out or build a fort or do something. One of Mary and I's goals has been to raise and launch kids that love God and love others. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's a challenge. There's trouble in that. Just to be quite honest, there's trouble in that. There's worry, there's anxiety. And I think for myself, I want yesterday's mercies. I'm not certain that I'm ready for God's mercies today. I kind of stuck in wanting yesterday's mercies, but his mercies are new for me every day. And then the second part, I want a guarantee of specific future mercies. I want to know exactly what he's going to do. I want to be able to see the future. So I'm going to tell you some mercies I've received that I did not want. So it's been 12 years now. My mom passed away in July of 2010. And those were mercies I didn't want. And part of it, it's been 12 years. Goodness gracious. You'd think it would be easier. I need a little mercy right now, God. Could I get a little mercy? Okay. Part of that was I was sitting there. I was studying for school. I was trying to do something with my life that I felt like honored God. And I get this phone call that your mom passed away. And all of a sudden, my focus has shifted. And I have to figure out what to do. And I needed God right then. I didn't want those mercies. I wanted the mercies of my mom lives forever, or, yeah, I did. I wanted those mercies, but I didn't get those mercies on that day. And I'll tell you what I did. I went back to school. This is kind of funny now. I went back to school. I lived in Dallas, Texas. Mary and I, we drove here. We stayed here a week and went back to Dallas. I almost said we went back home, but we went back to Dallas. I went to the library. This is the nerdiest thing I'm going to tell you. I went to the library, and I went to the grief section of the library. I'm like, okay, there's got to be one in here. How to get rid of this in an hour, How to get rid of this blue that I'm feeling. And here I am 12 years later, and I still struggle to talk about it. Those weren't God's mercies for me that day. They weren't. I needed different mercies. And what I found through that process is every day he met me. He didn't give me 2 days from now mercies. He didn't tell me, hey, Ted, there's going to be 12 years from now. You're going to be standing on a stage and you're going to be explaining to people how merciful I was to you on the way. He didn't give me that. But he gave me these little mercies that I needed every day. And he was so faithful in doing that. And some of it was like mercies from some of you, And some of it were mercies I couldn't see, but every day there was new mercies. But it doesn't resolve my tension because those weren't the mercies that I wanted. One of the problems with yesterday's mercies, I told you my kids used to be more affordable. They were. The other day, my daughter, she had some friends over at the house. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they're like, hey, we're just here. We're just grabbing a snack. I was like, oh, couldn't we have done this at somebody else's house? Or couldn't we have had like a pre-plan where we all bring our snacks? And if somebody touches the blueberries, they are in trouble. If you've priced blueberries lately, they are expensive. I wanted yesterday's mercies, but I failed to see in my mind, these were my daughter's friends that she's bringing over that feel comfortable enough walking into our home to get a snack. I'm okay with that. We're trying to raise them to love God and to love others. But my issue is my focus was down. My focus was on my feet. I didn't see that. I saw, man, they're eating the blueberries. I know they're eating the blueberries. You think I'm kidding about this? Go price blueberries. They're not cheap. And they weren't. And sometimes I'll see my son. He'll leave the house and like, hey, Dad, we're going to church. I'm like, are you guys riding together? You're riding together, right? Everybody's in one car, No, we're taking separate cars. It's like, oh, okay, all right. And I want to be so peaceful about that. And a part of it, back to the first point, is my focus is down. My focus is on my feet. I'm trying to figure out the next little step. And guys are like, hey, I got different mercies for you. I got some different mercies. And so I come to kind of the third point, and really the application for how I think this plays out is casting our cares on the Lord. This verse occurs this specific passage occurs in two places. I put this one here. I think this one's really important. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6 through 7. It says, humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at a proper time he will exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. The truth is, God cares for me, and he cares for you. So, my anxieties that I face with my family, they may not look like your anxieties. Your anxieties may be with your coworkers or with your family of origin or your health. You have a whole host of anxieties, but I think we share a general purpose of it. It's like, what do we do with those anxieties? How do we deal with them? And it becomes really clear. Psalm 55 says, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. And so that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for inside of my anxieties. Is I'm looking for some help. I'm looking for someone to sustain me. I'm looking for a real and meaningful answer. And so I want to be practical for a second and tell you a couple of things that I've been trying to do with my anxieties. I am a thought-oriented person. You may be a feelings-oriented person. I think the principle is very similar. Sometimes in the morning, I'll wake up already stewing, already ruminating about what's going to happen today. And the truth is, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen today. This morning was no different. I told Guy this before the service. I actually had a dream about him last night. True story. I went to the wrong church this morning. And I was attending church like a normal person, and I looked down at my watch. It was 11 o'clock. And I'm walking out of the church service, and I see Guy. And he's like, dude, what did you... And that's where the dream ends. So I feel like even in my dreams, I have anxiety. Like I'm missing church today. I'm missing you guys. So one of the things that I've tried to do is that's why I say this is more of a journey and less of a mandate about how this goes. And again, I wish we could have this conversation over coffee. One of the things that I've been trying to do is in the very beginning of the morning to sort of capture my day with thinking about God and thinking and praying. And so what that looks like, very simply, is I'll wake up and I'll try to, this is one of the most simple ways I pray, and this can take you, like less than 5 minutes. It's called ACTS, A-C-T-S. I try to acknowledge God for who he is. Like, God, you were so merciful to me yesterday, and I know your mercies are new to me today. I don't know what those look like, but I acknowledge you and what you've got coming. I confess my sins. Some days that takes longer, just being honest. I thank God for all the things that he's done and all the things that he's doing. And then I ask him for the things that I'm looking for, the things that God, I pray that my kids have a good day. I pray that my wife has a good day. Lord, help me as I do the things that I'm going to do today. And what I've found, and again, this is an experiment, and I'll be honest, I failed this morning. I woke up thinking about being here. I was like, man, what if I do the whole message and it's 20 minutes, and then Marty calls me and, I get in trouble or something. I don't know. But I woke up thinking about this. My brain was already going. But I'm attempting to wake up and immediately think about the Lord and begin my life focused on that way. And that's not a huge thing. I'm saying it is a huge thing, but it's not a mountain to climb. And the second thing that I've been doing, so I'm a list maker. I make lists. They're on little pieces of paper. A lot of times a quartered piece of paper, gets my whole life on there. And as I write my list, I'm asking God, where are your mercies in this? Not, where are your mercies in this, God, but what are your purposes in this? What do you have for me in this? God, when I call this person, what do you have in that today? I know what my purposes are. My purposes are to get them to come to an AIM class or to, whatever. But what do you want for them, God? What do you have for them? And sort of trying to open up my hands towards God, as opposed to saying, okay, God, I know what I'm doing today. I don't know what you're doing. And I hope it kind of wraps around what I'm doing, but, I know what I'm doing. And so that's been helpful. And I'm not telling you that I'm perfect on this. This has been a journey. And then, so those are like proactive things that I've been doing. I want to talk about this. This never happens at Northstar.Church as far as the sound team goes, okay? If you've ever run sound or you've ever been involved in any level of live band, this is a mistake that people make. You'll be listening to music, you're running the soundboard, and you cannot hear the guitar. So you raise the volume up on the guitar. Like, okay, all right, I can hear the guitar now. Everything's good. Now you can't hear the bass guitar. So you got to scooch that up a little bit. Okay, now I got the bass, I got the guitar. Now you cannot hear the vocals. Crank those up. And next thing you know, everything's just maxed out, and it just sounds brown. That never happens at Northstar. These guys are amazing. But it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. And so one of the things that I'm asking God about is, how do I pull all of the faders in my life that are unnecessary down and kind of start over? And what does that look like? What does that look like? How do I pull all the faders in my life down and kind of start over? I tell you an experience that we had. I hope that you had this experience to a certain extent. Post-Hurricane Michael, a lot of the faders in my life came down. There were just certain things that I wasn't worried about anymore. And then it's weird, and someone said this, and then you got your electricity back, and then you got the internet back, and then it's funny, a lot of those faders came rushing right back. I want to be really specific. This rectangle is a great rectangle, okay? It's fantastic. It holds some of my life's favorite memories. I can search on here for pictures of my kids, pictures of my wife, pictures of my dog. It is fantastic. And I'm not saying that this thing is evil, okay? I'm not. But its goal is to keep me engaged with it. There's a reason, I think, well, there's several reasons, but Verizon's willing to give you one of these right now. They say that on their commercial. They want you to engage this thing and stay engaged. And I know that sounds like oddly specific, but even in doing marriage help, it's interesting to me how often this becomes a problem, that it's one of these volume knobs that's gotten turned way up in your life, just activity on your phone or activity, on social media, and we're missing the important things that are kind of going on around us. And I'll give us all a ton of grace. This is new, in the scope of life. I mean, this is from 2007 on, and I think we're all still trying to figure out what role this rectangle plays in our life, for the good and for the bad. This is also the place where I probably read the Bible the most, So I'm not saying that it's all negative, but this thing's goal is to keep me engaged with it. And so being honest about that and just saying what volume knobs on this, and it's like a great distraction sometimes. I'm worried about what's going on with my kids or with my life, and I'll get on here and I'll either be happy about watching people fail or I'll be happy about watching people succeed or whatever. But it's a fantastic distraction. And so I just say, be careful with it. What role does this rectangle have in your life, and how does that affect your relationship with God? It's just a question. So I want to end today with a passage of Scripture that I think is extremely important. It's a story that Jesus tells Or it's a story, including Jesus. It's found in Matthew 14, and it's a very familiar story. It's talking about Peter walking out on the water. And so, to kind of set the scene, Jesus had got done speaking. The disciples got on a boat, and they're kind of sailing off. And it's windy, it's rough. And Jesus starts walking out on the water towards the boat, And Jesus spoke to him, and he said, "Don't be afraid." They were afraid. They were in that boat, and they were afraid. He says, "Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come out on the water." So Peter's, I love the disciple Peter. He doesn't always get it right, but man, he swings, like it's Michael Jordan. You miss all the shots that you don't take. Like he's taking a shot here. And Jesus says, "Come on." Actually, he just says, "Come." That's my southern inversion, come on. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and he began sinking and he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out to him and took his hand and took hold of him. He says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshiped him, truly saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I've read this story a lot. I gravitate towards this story. I think it embodies a lot of what I'm trying to communicate today. And I think the tension even exists. What this story does not say is that Jesus walked out to the boat and the disciples were in the boat and it was perfect conditions. The waters were calm. It was daylight. Jesus built a little footbridge that Peter could walk out on, and it was going to be safe, and it was going to be preferred future. That's not what it says. But Jesus sustains Peter in spite of the wind and the circumstances. The circumstances are not the problem. What's going on right now is not the problem. It's what I'm focused on. So Peter looks at his feet and he begins to sink. It wasn't that Jesus couldn't sustain him. It wasn't that the circumstances need to be perfect. It was that he needed to stay focused on the goal and on the mission. That's it. How do we resolve our anxieties? How do we navigate this? There's no promise that there won't be trouble. There's not. I wish I could say that. I think there's plenty of people that do say that. Well, you just trust in Jesus and nothing bad's going to happen. I'm 40. That is not true. Plenty of bad things have happened. But it's what am I looking for in that? What am I looking for? Am I looking for things on this earth, or am I looking for things in a preferred future? And that's the question. It gets really dicey for me when I look down and when I kind of see everything around me. And I got to be honest, I could have stayed in bed today and just worried about that. There's plenty. There's plenty. I talk about my kids driving like that's a picnic. Every time they leave the house, I'm just excited. I'm like, man, that is a little liability that just walked out of my house or drove out of my house. But the state of Florida trusts them, with a license, and so I will too. But it's not that there won't be trouble. It's that we have Jesus with us, sustaining us. And he gives us mercies every day that we walk in. I know that doesn't solve trouble, but I think it's a help towards solving the anxieties that we have. If we can pray together. God in heaven, I thank you so much. Lord, on this earth, I think one of the things that I get the most concerned about is being alone or being lonely. And inside of your plan for humanity, you made it so that was never so, that you were with me. And God, that is such just a breath of fresh air. And Lord, I thank you for your mercies every day. God, I don't know what they're going to look like. I have no idea what the mercies for tomorrow are going to look like, but I know that you're going to be with me. And Lord, I pray for each of us as we kind of go through a tumultuous time. Lord, I pray that we can keep our eyes up and keep our eyes focused on what you have going on. And Lord, not our feeble plans. And Lord, I pray that we'll have grace and dignity in doing that. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.